Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a huge question, inspired by Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson's book, Why Nations Fail. And that question is, what's the real reason some countries are rich while others are poor?
So, let's kick things off with a real-world puzzle. Picture this: a single city, Nogales, literally cut in half by the US-Mexico border fence. On the north side, in Arizona, the average person makes about $30,000 a year. Kids go to school, you can expect to live a long life, and you have access to things like healthcare and public utilities. But just a few feet away, on the south side, in Sonora, Mexico, the average income is a third of that. Crime is high, life expectancy is lower, and the infrastructure is shaky at best.
I mean, think about it. You've got the same people, the same climate, pretty much the same culture, yet they're living in totally different worlds. And the book makes this incredible point. If we can solve the puzzle of Nogales, we can unlock the secret to why whole nations either thrive or fail.
Okay, so before we get to the real answer, we've got to do a little myth-busting. Let's look at the usual suspects, the explanations you always hear for global inequality, and see why they just don't hold up.
All right, first up, the geography hypothesis. You've probably heard this one, right? The idea that countries in the tropics are just destined to be poor. It's too hot, there's more disease, the soil's bad for farming. Basically, the geography is destiny.
But here's where it gets really interesting. History actually tells the exact opposite story. If you rewind to the year 1500, the richest, most advanced civilizations in the Americas, we're talking the Aztecs and the Incas, they were all in the tropics. And places like the future US and Canada, they were the relatively poor regions. Today, it's completely flipped. This reversal of fortune is pretty solid proof that geography is not the whole story.
Okay, so if it's not geography, what's next? Well, how about the culture hypothesis? This is the one that says, some cultures just have a better work ethic or values that are more suited for economic success.
And for this one, there is no better case study than the Korean Peninsula. I mean, think about it. Before they were divided after World War II, North and South Korea were one people. Same history, same language, same culture for centuries. But look at them now. South Korea is this global tech and economic giant, while North Korea, well, it's a story of famine and total economic collapse. The culture didn't change overnight, the rules they had to live by did.
All right, last suspect on our list, the ignorance hypothesis. This one's pretty simple. It basically says poor countries are poor because their leaders are just clueless. They just don't know which economic policies actually work. If they could just get some good advice from the experts, everything would be fine.
It sounds nice, but it really doesn't hold up to scrutiny. The book makes a powerful point. Leaders of poor countries often know exactly what they need to do to make their country grow. The problem isn't that they're ignorant. The problem is that the right policies would threaten their own power and their own wealth. So they deliberately choose to keep bad policies in place because it benefits them and their allies, even if it hurts everyone else.
So, we've busted the geography myth, we've poked holes in the culture theory, and we've seen it's not about ignorance. So what's left? Well, this is the core idea of the book. It all comes down to a country's institutions. It is all about the rules of the game.
Okay, so what does that mean? Well, countries that succeed have what the authors call inclusive economic institutions. Think of these as rules that let everyone play the game. They protect your property, they make sure contracts are fair, they let you start a business without bribing someone. They create a level playing field so that most people have a reason to work hard, to invent, and to invest.
And on the flip side, you have extractive economic institutions. These are the total opposite. They aren't designed to create wealth for everyone. They're designed to extract wealth from the many and funnel it to a tiny group of elites at the top. This is where you see things like forced labor, monopolies run by the president's family, or laws designed to crush any new competition.
And the difference is just night and day, right? On one side, your property's safe, the law applies to everyone, and you're free to try new things. That's what gives people incentives. But on the other side, nothing is secure, the law is just a tool for the rich, and all the doors are closed. It just kills any motivation for the vast majority of people.
So, where did these two different sets of rules come from? They didn't just appear out of nowhere. We have to look back at how history forged these very different paths, often centuries ago.
A huge part of this story starts with colonialism in the Americas. When the Spanish arrived, they found huge, dense populations and tons of gold and silver. So what did they do? They set up a purely extractive system, like the mitha, which was a brutal system of forced labor in the mines. But when the English got to North America, they tried to do the same thing. and it completely failed. Why? There just weren't enough people to enslave. So they had to switch gears. To get anyone to come over and work, they had to offer real incentives, land of their own, and eventually a say in their own government. And right there, you see the very early seeds of more inclusive institutions starting to grow.
And get this, just to give you a sense of the scale, the population density where the Spanish were, like in central Mexico, was more than 500 times greater than on the east coast of North America. That one statistic pretty much explains why the Spanish plunder and exploit model could work there, but was a total non-starter for the English.
Okay, but this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. These different institutional paths have huge consequences for how wealth is created today. And a great way to see this is to compare how two famous billionaires made their fortunes. So let's take Bill Gates in the US. How did he get rich? Through innovation, right? Creating Microsoft Windows. The inclusive system in America protected his ideas and allowed him to build a massive company. But, and this is key, that same system also had rules to check his power. Think about the antitrust lawsuits he faced. The system both rewarded his innovation and stopped him from becoming an absolute monopolist.
Now let's compare that to Carlos Slim in Mexico. His path to billions was very different. He got incredibly wealthy by buying the state's telephone company when it was privatized. He used his deep political connections to make sure he got the deal, and then used the legal system to block any and all competition for years. His fortune came not from out-innovating everyone, but from controlling the system. A classic example of wealth generation in an extractive environment.
So what's the big takeaway here? When we ask why some countries are rich and others are poor, the answer isn't their geography, it's not their culture, and it's not that their leaders are ignorant. It's their institutions. It's the rules of the game. Prosperity, it turns out, isn't an accident. It's designed. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. Are the institutions that shape your life, in your country, your industry, your community, designed to be inclusive for all or extractive for just a few?